to another week of Elevate Online. We're doing something a tad bit different today. Today's challenge titled the Watermelon Explosion. So here's how it's gonna work. We are all going to write down our guess for how many rubber bands it takes to make this watermelon explode. Super easy, super simple, and let's hope we get a great big explosion. Let's do it!
Let's do it.
Woo! Starting to warp a little bit already. All right, guys, so each cup has 50 rubber bands, and after we start, getting tighter and tighter, we're gonna keep track of how many we have exactly. Because it's starting to get a little tight.
Let's say we can all.
If you hit
Yeah.
I'm really anxious. I don't like this game. My glasses are starting to clog up. I don't care anymore.
This is not good.
It's starting to happen.
Okay, so doing 3 this time. Boom! Explode already.
I'm starting to see a little bubble right here. Pastor Matt is out! That's 80. Now, technically, I already won, but we're gonna see this thing explode, right, T? Oh, this is- Here we go, guys.
I'm scared.
All right, no, just keep going, Come on. Oh, guys, thank you so much. I won. Let's do this thing. That was great. Hey guys, what's going on? PT here for another week of Elevate Online. I'm glad you guys are here with us today. Got a question for you. Have you ever seen Indiana Jones? Okay, I just can't do it. I can't take myself seriously in this hat. Indiana Jones first came out in like the 1970s, I want to say, early 80s, something around those lines. Anyways, it's got Harrison Ford in it, and it's basically this guy he's an archaeologist slash adventurer slash don't know. There's no real archaeologist like him. It's just kind of fictional. But anyways, I love the films. I love the movies because Harrison Ford is great and the action's good and John Williams' music and Steven Spielberg is just a lot of great fun. In The Last Crusade, which is the third film, Indiana Jones is on this quest and he's out to find the Holy Grail. And his father gets shot and he's wounded and he's hurt. And so he is in this cave place where he's trying to get through these different obstacles, these different riddles to get to where the Grail is at. And one of the last ones was this riddle, this thing called a leap of faith. And he comes across this big, huge gap, this cliff where there's nothing below him. And yet the riddle, this I don't know where he got the book from, I can't remember, but it basically said just to take a leap of faith and just walk across it. He reluctantly kind of, whatever, he doesn't want to do it, but his dad is dying and the only way to heal him is to get the Holy Grail with water and to pour it over him. And so he decides to just take a leap of faith. And he takes that step out and sure enough, there's this little sliver of hidden camouflaged pathway that goes all the way across and he's able to get to the other side and eventually save his dad. But the reason why I'm talking about this is because in the month of August, I've been kind of gearing our messages to talk about coming back to school and to talk about kind of different things that we need to do and things we need to do to prepare and just a lot of different things. And today, to conclude all these different talks about coming back to school, I wanted to talk about one big thing that usually prevents us from moving forward into the plans that God has for us, and that is fear. So we're going to talk about that. Today we're going to talk about how we can overcome our fears by realizing the fears in our lives. Today's message is titled, Fear is a Lie. Fun fact, I was actually born and raised in East Texas and was raised on a ranch for 7 years of my life. Another fun fact is I'm allergic to horses and cows. So that was fun. Alright, so to get this lesson started, we're going to start off in 1 Kings chapter 19. It says this, Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He took his servant and went to Beersheba in Judah. Leaving the servant there, Elijah walked a whole day into the wilderness. He stopped and sat down in the shade of a tree and wished he would die. It's too much, Lord, he prayed. Take away my life. I might as well be dead. Okay, so I'm sure you're like, what does that have to do with anything? Yeah, I'm gonna have to paraphrase this really long story, which actually get us started into this lesson. So let's do this. Here we go. Once upon a time in ancient Israel, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who were the leaders of Israel at the time, were basically messing everything up. King Ahab had decided to dismiss God, Yahweh, our God, and basically start worshiping these other gods, one including Baal, B-A-A-L, however you pronounce that. And Queen Jezebel was quite well known for actually going out and hunting prophets and leaders of the people who worshiped the one true God. Crazy stuff. During that time, there's a guy named Elijah who was a prophet of the one true God, our God, Yahweh, and he basically went to King Ahab and basically told him, hey, you need to chill out. You need to forget all these other fake gods who haven't done anything for you and start worshiping the real God. He comes back and basically says, all right, hey, you know what? This is enough. I want to challenge you and your gods, and we're going to have ourselves a showdown. So what he does is he gets King Ahab to bring him his best prophets for the gods, Baal and the other guys, and he is basically saying, all right, whoever can build an altar and then have their god ignite the fire wins. Pretty simple, right? So the prophets of Baal, basically, they come together, they build this huge altar, and it's big and it's massive and it's got a bull on there for the sacrifice. Everything looks good and they start worshiping and calling out to their God, start the fire, and then nothing happens. And then Elijah's like, got you. And so he decides to do something even better. He's basically just drop the mic on these guys. He not only builds an altar, he makes it really big, and then he tells these guys to basically just pour water all over the wood. I don't know if you know this, but water and fire don't usually mix very well. So he pours it all over the wood and the sacrifice, and he just sits back and goes, God, do your thing. And sure enough, God just goes boosh, and the whole altar, it just burns up and incinerates. Everything is burnt. The water from the surrounding trench evaporates. Elijah partnered up with God, and God showed up, and he just basically did this really amazing, cool thing and showed that everyone else was absolutely wrong. They were worshiping a fake God who doesn't even really exist. So after this whole big showdown, Queen Jezebel hears about this, and she is not too excited. And she basically puts a hit order on Elijah and basically threatens him like, hey, yo, you're gonna die soon. So Elijah freaks out and he basically just runs away. God reassures him like, hey, look, I'm gonna give you some more instructions, but go climb up this mountain first and we'll talk there. He's going up this mountain, he's waiting to hear from God, and all of a sudden this big, huge wind comes around and it basically like shatters rocks and just blows things everywhere. And yet it says in the scripture that God was not in the wind. And then this big, huge earthquake just shakes the whole mountain, but it says that God's not in an earthquake either. Elijah goes even higher, and then this huge fire just totally takes up the mountain out of nowhere, but God's not in the fire either. But then, as everything quiets down, it says that a whisper came out of nowhere and began to talk to Elijah, and it was God. And he was talking to him through this quiet, still voice, and he basically gave him instructions on where to go from here and basically how to help the nation of Israel move forward. But that's where we're going to stop here, because this basically encompasses what we're going to talk about today, is how Elijah, even though he had this amazing encounter with God, even though God definitely very visibly showed himself through this action, even despite all of that, Elijah still had fear. And ultimately, this fear was not a doubt of God's power, but it was a doubt of his plan. And so today, I'm going to talk about three reasons why fear is a lie. Let's get into it. All right, for point number 1, we're going to Numbers chapter 14, starting in verse 20. The Lord answered, I will forgive them as you have asked, but I promise that as surely as I live and as surely as my presence fills the earth, none of these people will live to enter that land. They have seen the dazzling light of my presence and the miracles that I performed in Egypt and the wilderness, but they have tried my patience over and over again and have refused to obey me. Point number 1 is this, is that fear is irrational. And in the same way, what we just read in the scripture, it stopped the Israelites. See, prior to this verse that we just read, Israel had basically been set free from slavery, and God basically opens the door and says, hey, this is the land that you're going to take. They send some spies in there and find out there's giants living there, and they're like, oh, we don't like that, let's just go back to Egypt where we were slaves. And the funny thing behind this is that it was so irrational. They had already experienced a God bigger than these giants, who had saved them from a huge Egyptian army, who saved them from the Red Sea, who has given them food and water in the desert. And it was just crazy to think about how their fears kept them from going to their promised land. When we allow fear into our lives, it creates this illusion that it's the real thing. Rather, fear is irrational, and it prevents us from moving forward and prevents us from growing and doing bigger and better things. So don't get caught up in fear. For point number 2, we're going to 1 John chapter 4. There is no fear in love. Perfect love drives out all fear. So then, love has not been made perfect in anyone who is afraid, because fear has to do with punishment. Simply put, fear is a great thief. When you think about punishment, punishment is actually like a restraining on what you are allowed to do. What the scripture is telling us is that when people are afraid, it actually prevents us from doing the things that God has enabled us to do. It steals those things away from us. And that's kind of the point. Point number 2 is fear steals. It is a great thief. It takes away things from us. It prevents us from doing things, and it all comes from us allowing it to take the things inside of us. And so a lot of times we don't realize that we have fear in our lives. A lot of times when we think about fear, we think about it as this like kind of like the Indiana Jones thing I was talking about earlier, like there's this immediate threat right here that I can see. But a lot of times fear can be disguised, and it can be hidden in our lives, but it can be very visible if you know where to look. So if you want to know if there's fear in your life, whether you know it or not, here are a few things that fear takes away and are good indicators that there is some kind of fear in your life. The first one is love. Fear steals love. I mean, think about it just practically, is that when we have fear in our lives, it prevents us from, one, loving others, prevent us from allowing others to love us because we're afraid that we're gonna let them down. Ultimately, when we have fear in our lives, it prevents us from loving people and from people loving us. Another thing that fear steals from us is hope. They think about it this way, hope is a God-given promise for the future. And if we have fear, it actually prevents us from having a hope in our lives. Think about it this way, if you find yourself not looking forward to the future, if you find yourself not looking excited for the future, that's a good indication that there's a fear for the future. We should be able to trust God enough to know that whatever the future is, whatever lies ahead, that He is going to be there for us and He's going to be there with us in that future. Another thing that fear steals away from us is the truth. Elijah had the perfect reason to trust God. He had a very simple truth that God was real and the other God was not. And he had a very, very real indication that God was able to protect him him. And yet, when Jezebel threatened him, he ran away. Elijah needed to accept the truth that God had everything under control. And then another way of looking at this is that fear oftentimes prevents us from telling the truth. Whether it's us not telling people who we truly are or trying to twist who we are to be accepted into a certain group, to be liked, fear just absolutely traps the truth. It prevents the truth from coming out. And when we allow that fear to control our lives, eventually we become someone who we were never made to be. And for this last point, I want to share a verse that means a whole lot to me. It's probably the verse that got me through most of high school. It's Joshua 1:9. It says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified nor discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." I think that verse meant so much to me because I truthfully and honestly had a lot of fear about my future. I had a lot of fear about where everything was going to end up, what college I was going to go to, what girl was I going to marry, what things were going to happen in my life. Was I going to be able to be a youth pastor? Was I going to have to go to school? Just all these different questions. And ultimately, I think if I would have realized point number 3, that God is with me, that God is still with me, then I think I would have enjoyed high school a little bit more. I would have enjoyed the moments I was in. I would have just been more confident in who I was and been more confident in the things that I was doing. And I kind of want to let you know that God is still here with you. Wherever you're at, whatever challenges you're facing, whatever has happened to you, whatever you've done, whatever it is, God is still with you. Another encouraging way to look at this is Elijah. Even though he saw God do this amazing miracle in front of him, and even though he had fear in his heart and fled away from Jezebel, and he didn't trust God, even despite all of that, God tells him again to go up a mountain, and he goes up the mountain, and he's waiting to hear from God, and all these big crazy things happen. The fire, possible tornado, an earthquake. God doesn't speak through those things, but rather he spoke to Elijah in this small voice. And I think that's a really great reminder that even when we mess up, even when we act in fear, God is still here with us. And he's not here in this super loud voice to correct us or to get down on us, but rather, like in this story, he's here in a soft, still voice to encourage us, to remind us that he loves us and that it's okay to be uncertain sometimes and that it's okay to trust him and it's okay to give everything to him. So let me encourage you, let go of your fears. Acknowledge that fear is just a lie wanting to hold you back from the things that God has for you, and to just completely surrender yourself to who God is and to trust him every single step of the way. Not bad.
Very juicy.
It's a hair.
Maybe you should get it.
Guys, thank you so much for checking us out on YouTube. Hope you guys enjoyed the message today.
Yes, it was a great message, wasn't it?
It was fantastic.
It was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Hey guys, don't forget to like and to share
And to comment.
and to comment
And subscribe.
and subscribe. Guys, we just thank you so much for just joining us and being a part of what we're doing here at Elevate. I think that's it.
That's it.
Guys, thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye,
We
everyone.
love you.
If you guys could wrap that really tight, that'd be great.